the X2 times 2 times 3. How they want it to be submitted, that claim submitted to that particular payer, is something you would look for in that code and compliance plan. However it is that they want it submitted, that's how you would want to submit. Otherwise, they're going to kick it back at you, and so that is important when it comes to this particular section.
Where can you find the coding compliance manual?
The healthcare organization would have that.
Is there any way you can have access to it so I can take a look?
I can get possibly a sample coding compliance plan. Let me see what I can do just so that you can have an example of what I'm talking about. But each healthcare organization has their specific plan. Like, okay, if I were working, and I'm just putting this out there, if I worked at XYZ Hospital and we accepted insurance from 17 different providers. I'm just making these numbers up. But we have insurance by 17 providers, and we also have Medicare. My coding compliance plan would address anything special, specific, anything that pertained to one of those different payers. Would I have information in my coding compliance plan for that 18th insurance company that we don't use? Absolutely not. It's company specific. So each organization has their own plan. So it's not something that, is across the board universal. The example that I provide to you all might be universal, but it's a starting point. At least you would know what you are looking at. It's kind of I call it the Bible because it's for that organization, this is how we do it. It kind of lists everything out, and those little quirky things that people have experienced. They say you live and you learn. So, okay, this claim submitted, the insurance company kicked it back for this reason, well, let's document it so that we don't keep making the same mistakes, because mistakes cost money. So by keeping track of all those little, do you call them idiosyncrasies, or you keep track of all of those things, at least it's a benefit to the healthcare organization because it saves time. Of course, the more times you do something, the repetition and having the claim kicked back at you, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we can't submit it like that. We have to make sure we do it like this because you learn. So why not document that learning as you go? Saves time, saves energy, right? So those little rules, I'll see what I can dig up. And did you have a question, Carol?
Oh, that also depends on what one insurance worker might kick it back, another one might not.
Absolutely. But if you are assuring, it's contractual. So any agreement that is made with an insurance company, the healthcare organization gets a contract from that particular insurer or that third-party payer. They receive a contract. So that contract becomes the agreement between the healthcare organization and the payer. So anything that is a rule, a stipulation, it's documented. So I'll bring in some examples because I'm sure I can pull something together to give you, so that you can understand that that's how all of this kind of comes into play.
Does it get confusing with 18 different insurance companies?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay.
It does. It does. That's why a lot of the times you go with the most strictest. You go with the most strictest. Of course, they're going to have a compliance plan. It's not like you have to go into a healthcare organization or working for a physician and saying, all right, I'm going to rewrite everything. Let me see all the contracts. Let me see, they have it already in place, but it is a great thing to review as when you're getting acclimated, becoming accustomed to that particular role.
Right.
It's good to be able to look at that and say, yes, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that. You're going to make mental notes, but that is going to be something that you flag, you have as a quick, handy resource before or as you're coding claims. Because especially, I'm kind of giving you a little highlight saying it's something that you would want to make sure, you know, that however the payer, so okay, everybody remember, integumentary, when you're coding that, it's how the payer wants to receive it. So that's a little cue to say, I'm coding for the integumentary, oh shoot, I gotta make sure that the insurance company, this is how they're gonna accept it. Because it is, when you're working at a, you know, a larger healthcare organization, when you could have 125 different accepted insurance policies, that's where the coding compliance plan, it takes a lot of the guesswork out. You want to make sure that is one of the first things. It's almost as though you're going into a new organization, and one of the first things you say is, I need to see the policies, procedures. You know, they sit you down for orientation with HR, and they go over all of those different bloodborne pathogens. They go over this, they go over that. Working for a coding department, that's your policies and procedures for the most part. So, I'll see what I can pull together. It's nice to see those, just to have an idea of, okay. So, I will do that. Destruction, again, that's that ablation. It's ultimately any type of a benign or malignant type of tumor is being destroyed. We're destroying it completely. Again, performed by laser for the most part. Mohs microsurgery, we talked about the eponyms. We talked about that, the surgery that's named after the person who invented it. That's an example of that. It's usually used in the treatment of skin cancer. The provider usually acts as the surgeon and the pathologist. When we talked about modifiers last week, we talked about the professional component and the technical component. What's the difference between the two? Can anyone tell me what the difference is between a professional component and a technical component? Let's use radiological services as an example. And I know we haven't covered that information yet, but let's think about radiology for a minute. What is radiology? We're taking pictures, right? Okay, now, let's think about that. Wouldn't that, the taking of the pictures, technical component, if we're talking about the professional component, what are we doing with those pictures? See, I knew you all had it, and that is the professional component. We're actually reading those pictures. So, excellent.
So it's
Excellent,
the
excellent.
technical component, the X-ray technologist who takes the, just do
It's the actual, the taking of the pictures. Some healthcare organizations hire outside contractors to come to the facility to provide that service. So that is something, a lot of them don't have a radiological department. They don't have that. They don't have radiology. So they have, you'll see that with a lot of laboratory as well.
like in nursing homes.
Absolutely. They don't home that service. So you may see the PC or the 26, modified 26. So professional component and technical component. Let's see, where was I? I'm jumping around a little bit, huh? Mohs microsurgery. Of course, this process is going to be continued until all cancerous cells are gone. That's the idea behind that. There's a little illustration on how the surgery is actually performed, how many different incisions. It's kind of a scraping of the outer skin cells or layers until, again, all of the cancerous cells are gone. The subclassification of the breasts, again, that is where we have laterality interplay. There's 4 specific types of procedures, which could be the excising, have incisional, percutaneous, and biopsies. Again, this is where we're going to see that introduction utilized again. That means to introduce. Mastectomies have 4 different types of classifications, which we'll see the definitions for. Again, simple, complex, modified, radical, and radical. These different terms, of course, are going to be found in our medical record documentation. And if they're not, we're going to query the physician. So again, when we're talking about the integumentary system, we are not using modifiers because the skin is an outer covering of the body. When we're talking about the breasts, which are included in integumentary, modifiers are allowed. Okay? All right. So I have to say, I've been communicating with the library on the appropriate publisher that they purchased the CPT manuals from, because I still have not received my request of 2014. So I'm working on that, but I have not yet heard back from the library. So in my, and if someone with a 14 could just verify what page the surgery section actually begins on. I know that anesthesia was the section prior to surgery, and we kind of like, although we did a little bit of coding out of that section, we kind of jumped over it. We'll be going back to that section after we cover the surgical section. The surgical section, again, is the largest section of the CPT manual. Page 61. 61? So beginning on page 61, we have surgery guidelines. There's specific guidelines for the surgery section. Now that we're starting to get into the fun stuff, that's where these guidelines really come into play. AMA is great about providing the additional information that you need to do this job, specifically to their guidelines. You have to double check and review these sections, especially if you're not sure, you're unclear. Again, we never assume, we never guess, we research, right? So there is, right in the beginning, there's a notation on the types of services that are covered under these CPT codes in this section, right? It could be even a home visit. Does anyone know any physicians that do home visits? Mine does. Really? Mine does. Yeah, when I had strep last week, he came to my house Sunday morning. Sunday morning! I love my doctor. Oh my God, he's been my doctor now for at least 22 years. I'll tell you, I've delivered all 3 of my kids and everything. I absolutely love my doctor, and he does home visits. It's like, that's amazing. He's a family practitioner, but he's like the family practitioner. I mean, it's like, oh man, I don't know. He's awesome. Yeah. It's actually nice. It's really nice. So underneath the services that are covered in this particular section, we have what is defined as the CPT surgical package. Remember we talked about some of those global services that are incorporated into the CPT code? This isn't the case for every CPT code. I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. It's not the case in every code. The CPT manual will ultimately describe to you what services are covered. They may be in the guidelines for that particular section. But this is ultimately telling you verbatim what is included, what may need to have additional codes. Is everybody seeing that with me here? So it's kind of giving us a little rule of thumb for our surgery procedural codes. We're also, in this particular section, it discusses the E&M codes that I had mentioned. The E&M, again, is the service. The CPT is the procedure, okay? We have follow-up care for diagnostic procedures. Again, there's specific guidelines as to what is covered and what isn't. I know that someone, I'm not sure if it was in this class, but had asked me about, for a modifier with a procedure that's performed on the same day, you know, and a different physician performs that procedure, who does the follow-up care? Of course, it would be that initial physician. Now, when the initial physician, because we're not appending the modifier to that initial physician's code. Can everybody kind of see that? Why it would end up the responsibility of the original physician and not the second physician, where we appended the modifier? You have a patient that comes in, they have a procedure performed. They go home, they have an issue still, they come back, the other physician had already gone home for the day. But the procedure needs to be performed again, so a different doctor does it. As a coder, we append our modifier to state that it's same-day surgery performed by a different physician so that we can still bill for it, and this other physician can get paid for doing the procedure. But the follow-up care, if it's included, number one, because not every procedure code includes, it's not all a package deal, it's resource-based. Our equipment that is needed to perform the procedure is usually included, but follow-up, it depends on these guidelines, whether or not it's included. But if the procedure was originally performed by one doctor, the follow-up would be that doctor's responsibility, not the second physician that came in and did that second. Everybody clear with that? We appended the modifier to the second physician. So the insurance company is going to see, of course, that physician did it under special circumstances. Okay?
You know, that was like an emergency, you had to do it again.
Absolutely.
So it's a one-time payment to that other guy.
Right.
Second guy.
One-time payment for providing the service, but that original physician, if it's a code that includes follow-up care, it still falls on that first physician.
So they bill the physician for that.
What's that?
So if he comes in the second time, they bill the physician?
No.
First physician for it?
If the patient comes in for follow-up care for that particular procedure,
Do it again, the procedure again, the second time it's performed? Do they, does that physician have to bill the first physician? The second
No.
one?
No.
Still goes to
It
the
depends,
insurance
but
company.
not usually. They'll still bill for the service. They'll still bill their own, as though the other physician didn't even exist. They're still gonna bill like they did, they were the sole person that provided that. But of course, because of the insurance company is gonna kick that claim back and deny it because it was performed earlier that day, if it doesn't have that modifier. Of course, if a physician is coming in and they see, well, geez, this was just performed 8 hours ago, they're gonna know that modifier is needed, or they won't get paid. It's gonna be denied. This is a duplicate coding error. So if it doesn't have that modifier, again, they won't get paid. So the physicians know that. The physicians a lot of the times will code their own stuff and give it to the coder. The coder kind of verifies that information. That's those super bills that we talked about. So we have some instructions for follow-up care for different types of surgical procedures. Supplied materials, here's a definition on those supplied materials that are bundled into that global payment for a particular procedure. Here's a little instruction on that. Again, it includes the most common things that are used to provide that service, and this is based on history. Historically, this is what has been used, the resources that have been used. So that's where the payment comes into play. We have some guidelines on reporting more than one procedure, surgical procedure here. Several modifiers may apply. When we look at the section itself, I'll point out to you, a lot of the times the CPT manual will point you in the direction. If an applicable modifier may apply, it'll be noted. It'll be noted.